hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on March 12, 2025 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee, and I want to welcome everyone here tonight. A reminder that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? The next item is Student of the Month, and I'm going to hand this to Paul Goldner.
Student of the Month is our favorite item on the agenda. The Student of the Month program was established in 2019 by the school committee to honor exemplary students. Nominations are collected throughout the year from staff members at all 5 schools, and nominations are made through 5 categories: service to fellow students, teachers, or community, dedication, determination, and persistence in the face of obstacles, determination in attitude towards learning, high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts, and significant improvement in academics, athletics, or performing arts. Selections are made by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and 1 member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. Student of the month is Mateus Pinto, and he was nominated by Danielle Perkins. Congratulations, Mateus. Could you please both come up, and Danielle, could you tell us why you nominated Mateus?
All right. Ooh, hi. Liz Pacheco, assistant principal at the high school. Danielle and I collaborated here, so if you don't mind, we have 2 little quick spiels about Mateus. Come on up. Okay, this is your moment. Mateus, you are the embodiment of our district's mission statement, consistently demonstrating kindness, compassion, and leadership in ways that inspire those around you, including myself. You exemplify our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students, and you are a shining example of what it means to be an ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizen to our community. Mateus has a remarkable ability to quietly observe, assess, and take meaningful action, all without seeking recognition. Mateus has the it factor that people and others are drawn to him, particularly other students who see him as a role model. At the beginning of the year, I witnessed a powerful example of Mateus's leadership and empathy during lunch periods, right behind there in the courtyard. Over the course of several weeks, he observed a group of 9th grade students playing basketball in the courtyard and thoughtfully analyzed their social dynamics. One lunch period, I walked over to Mateus and I asked him what he saw. He immediately responded with a variety of insight into the social dynamics of that group. What Mateus did not know at that moment was he was spot on. There were significant social dynamics occurring within that group that a variety of professionals had been working on, including administration, guidance counselors, and social workers. So I asked Mateus, what are you going to do about it? He was sitting at the table right outside the window. He looked at me, he paused, and then he looked at 4 buddies sitting at the table with him, and he said, "Let's go, boys. We're going to go play some hoops." The 4 boys asked no questions. They just went and played hoops that day. Mateus rallied his friends, enjoyed the game, seamlessly integrating himself into the larger group. This small yet impactful act changed the dynamic almost immediately. By simply playing basketball, Mateus fostered a sense of inclusion and joy among the other students. His influence did not stop there. He continued to mentor one of those boys, building a supportive relationship that extended beyond school hours. This connection transformed that student's outlook on school. His parents later on expressed their gratitude for the positive changes that they noticed for their son as far as his passion for school and just how he presented at home. Mateus's actions are a perfect example of our mission statement in action. As a member of the Triton Unified basketball team, Mateus demonstrates a deep understanding of the importance of relationships and creating a supportive and inclusion community of learners. By stepping in to support students socially and emotionally, Mateus partners with peers to help them feel seen, valued, and heard. Mateus's leadership is calm, it's genuine, and it's deeply impactful. He approaches every situation with intent to make a difference, not for the recognition, but simply because it's the right thing to do. His quiet, intentional leadership is an inspiration for us all. The first day I met Mateus in ninth grade seminar, I knew he was someone special. You could just see it in his eyes. Mateus isn't just preparing himself for a deep future, he is actively creating a better present for those around him. Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm going to keep mine short and sweet. I originally nominated Mateus for his significant improvement in academics and athletics. I'm lucky enough to be his basketball coach. I'm not sure that there are words I can formulate to really make any of you fathom how far that this boy has come. Last year, I would message him every single day to make sure he knew what time we were supposed to be at practice or at a game, and that he knew how he was going to get there. This year, he called me out for being late. It was one day. It was for good reason, but ultimately, reflecting back, he could be nominated for all of the 5 criteria for nominations. Mateus is heavily involved in Triton's extracurricular offerings outside of the basketball team. He's active in DECA, Best Buddies, and Unified Basketball. He has such a gift for making those around him feel comfortable and included, and is a great teammate and showman of sportsmanship. One of my favorite moments was when a North Reading Unified athlete hit a three-pointer at the buzzer to end their game this year, and Mateus nearly tackled him to the ground, celebrating out of pure joy, not realizing that he really solidified a core memory for that young man. Mateus promotes confidence and celebrates success, no matter how small, while also holding those around him to appropriate standards with his competitive spirit, a balance that is rarely found in teenagers, but will serve him well in his captaincy next season. Mateus's growth in his communication and punctuality, coupled with his commitment to being a contributing member of society, are visible throughout the schoolhouse. His personality lights up every space that he enters, and he is destined for success in whatever he so chooses. Mateus, you are an asset to our community who truly embodies what it means to be a student athlete here at Triton, and you are beyond deserving of this recognition. I feel confident speaking for many of the staff in our building, as well as our coaching staff and program members, when I say that we are proud of you.
Thank you, Misty. Not gonna lie, I don't like talking in front of people. I get really nervous, but I just want to say thank you for this wonderful opportunity and for the kind words that were said. And honestly, it's a pleasure going to this school. I love everything about it. I love the environment. I love how they're so welcoming. Ever since I walked in here freshman year, I feel like it's been a new home. I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Sure, Matt, I appreciate you offering.
I'll take your phone. I'll take your phone. Thanks. Mine's on. Mine.
We have another honor tonight as one of our local education heroes, won the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Outstanding School Partner Award for 2024. I'd like to welcome Glenn Kuchar and Alicia Malone from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
Madam Chair, I know that you're going to be making a presentation on our behalf. Very briefly to explain, MASC provides recognition for outstanding school partnership each year in honor of the work of an individual or organization who provides meaningful and important contributions to the well-being of students or the school. And this year's nomination and the recipient is Mr. Weston, but I'm going to defer to the nominator, am I correct, who can explain exactly what the story behind the story is for the nomination. Or is that person participating?
Well, I'm going to turn this over to Erin in just a second, but I wanted to note that our nomination of John Weston was selected from submissions across the state, so congratulations to John, who's going to come up, and we'd like to thank him for everything he does for the district. Erin's going to read part of our nomination submission, and then the superintendent and the chair will present the award. Thank you very much to Glenn and Alicia for making the trip out here. I understand Glenn also spent 2 hours in the car, which is not a small feat in itself.
Along with hundreds of my nearest and dearest friends.
Hopefully you had a good audiobook.
John Weston is being honored tonight for his 2024 work to fund a fully free instrumental program for the fourth graders in all 3 of our elementary schools. This effort spurred new interest in instrumental participation and allowed the love of music to grow for our fourth graders. For those who know John, this was probably not a surprise, as he has long been a supporter of the Triton Regional School District. He has been financially enabling new initiatives ranging from the technology to the arts with a total donation amount of $50,000 over the past 5 years. John, we are greatly and deeply grateful for your contributions and so pleased to honor you with this award through the Massachusetts Association of School Committees.
Sure. I know, I'm happy to. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you. You're most welcome. Well, thank you. This is such an honor. I didn't understand that it was statewide until I walked in, but I'm just amazed. I do a lot of work with charities and helping them raise money, and I have to say this is a heck of a donor appreciation event. It really is. I do want to say quickly that, you know, people give to people, like people buy from people, right? And so you know, Brian is just someone that was easy to interact with here at the school. And I think I met Brian way back when my kids were like in the 2nd grade. He was just starting as a teacher. And right then I said, this guy's going somewhere. So I wasn't surprised to see you in your superintendent position. But about 5 years ago, I think we started talking about technology, and the background is that 2 of my 3 sons went to school here. For whatever reason, they didn't want to go to prep school, so I thought, all right, I saved a lot of money. So the least I can do is help Triton. But it has been really something rewarding for me to be able to give this money each year. And so we did technology for a couple of years, and then Brian said, you know, honestly, this a couple of years ago, he said, the technology is in good shape right now, but the music program has a big need. And he told me the story about how the music program had really run down to nothing during COVID, and how the kids, you know, the whole music initiative in the community was impacted. So I thought, all right, you know what, honestly, if Brian thinks this is what he needs, then I'm all on board. So I'm happy to have been able to do that. So whatever it takes to keep moving, now with this recognition, I think I have to keep on going for sure. All right, thank you.
So if I can just add one other thing. So this award recognizes the work through, you mentioned 2024. Since then, the commitment has been matched, and John has committed moving forward to keep supporting that fourth grade program in partnership with ICL Auto Group, which is owned by the Jesperson family. So the spirit of giving does foster and promote, so I appreciate the work you started and will continue to do. So.
Yes, of course.
I'm in the witness protection.
Next item is oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee?
Good evening, Bernie Cullen from Rowley. Last night, I don't know how many people here watched the Joint Finance Committee Select Board meeting in Rowley. That meeting was really built around the problems that Rowley is facing in terms of its budget. And our Finance Committee's estimate that what will be required is a $1.5 million override. Now, that's a big ask. That translates into, according to the Finance Committee, to an increase in the average homeowner of $650 in increased taxes, not counting the roughly 2.5%, which typically goes on each year. So that, by my rough calculations, comes to $900 per year. And that issue is not just for this year. But my prediction is that a similar increase is going to be requested unless there are substantial changes in the Triton budget, will be required for next year as well. So now we're looking at $900 for this coming year and then $900 for the following year. That in total comes to about a 20% increase in the taxes for the individual homeowners in Rowley. It's a big ask. I know we're at the end of the budget process, and I respect and compliment many of you for the hard work that you've done in pulling together this budget. But the hard number reality is that it's not going to be affordable. There will be an override. From what I have heard from around town, there stands zero chance of passing in Rowley. Zero chance of passing in Rowley. So we are into a very, very difficult situation. We'd appreciate any change to bring that number from $1.5 million down. That's all I have to say at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains no donations tonight. The consent agenda includes an overnight and out-of-state field trip request for final permission for the 8th grade to go to Washington, D.C. from April 1st to the 4th, 2025. Can I have a motion to approve consent agenda as presented?
Make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is student representative report. Student Representative Owen Silver is now going to update the committee.
This past Tuesday, the high school had its second ever Wellness Day, and from everything I've heard, it was very well received, just like the first one. And if anyone's unfamiliar with that, it's essentially a day where the focus is shifted away from academics, so students were able to choose from one of 30-some activities, things like beekeeping with Mr. Getty out in the field. So if you're interested in the beekeeping, by the way, there's the Triton Bee Collective Instagram where you can find out more, see some pictures. And so I think it was a successful day overall. Another success in the high school has been in Triton Theater, which is moving on to the semifinals for the METG, the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild Drama Festival. That's this weekend. And so I think this is the first time that since I've been at the high school, that the theater has gone on to those semifinals, so that's really exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Owen. Shannon, there's your chance. Go out with the beekeepers.
I know. That's why I was asking Carl. I know they're making one.
The next item is new business. Would any members like to raise additional items for inclusion on a future agenda? The next item is the superintendent's report. The superintendent will now give his report.
Sorry, I was thinking we were going to the budget first. So a few quick updates on the surveys. You know that we administered the family, student, and staff surveys, the SQM surveys in partnership with UMass Amherst right before February break. We had a strong participation with with students and staff. Not a great participation rate, like 10 to 15% with families. So we reissued that, sent out another reminder 2 weeks ago, and working with Peter at UMass, that has been now closed up. And so he has begun the process of putting the data into the Qualtrics platform and dashboard. And so we will have access to that in the coming weeks. I will certainly let you know, and then we are scheduled for a workshop on April 30th to review that and talk about next steps. Competency determination last month, Patrick, Megan, Anna were here to talk about an updated graduation requirement policy. Just to clarify here, the graduation requirement and our local requirement is different than the competency determination. And so we modified our policy to what we believed was going to be the guidance from the Department of Ed. At that link included in my report is the guidance, the draft regulations that the Department of Ed put out last week for public comment. We anticipate that it'll be a few weeks, and then they will begin to wrap up that process. You know, we now have or soon to have an interim commissioner. We had an interim commissioner, and now we have a current secretary who's also the interim commissioner, Pat Tutwiler, former superintendent in Lynn. So certainly there's a lot of changes going on. So hopefully this is something that gets clarified quickly. Separately, but also concurrently, you know that the governor has put together a task force to talk about and establish statewide graduation requirements. Again, completely different than the statutory competency determination. The goal, and my understanding, the hope, is that the graduation requirements in and of themselves satisfy competency determination similar to what we did in ours. I'm hoping it's that simple, but I feel good about, the fact that our policy as adjusted does match the draft regulations. So if those stand, we wouldn't have any more work to do. And hopefully as we move forward and get those updated statewide graduation requirements, those would also align with our local requirements. I know we've added things like financial literacy that other districts haven't added yet. Obviously, that's something they're talking about at the state level. So feeling good about where we're at, which is a lot more clear than we were about 3 months ago when this all happened with question 2. and there was just a big void of information. So, update there. Last month, you approved as a first reading, and tonight we'll approve as a second reading, or we'll consider as a second reading, a policy on surveillance cameras in schools. Nothing's changed on that policy for a second reading tonight. There was a question asked about, does that apply to school buses? In speaking with our attorney, he said, no, it explicitly does not. School bus cameras are very different in that they record both audio and video. They're also, I'm sure you've seen, if you've seen the screen, there's out the front of the bus, down the back of the bus, behind the bus, coming up the stairs, and capturing audio, as I said. So the suggestion was not to have a separate policy, but to include language in the handbook that, because you approve handbooks, carries the force of policy. To include the included language here, I'm not going to read it, but that language, my plan is to include that with the modified handbooks that you will receive later this summer for approval to implement next year. So, personnel report is there. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. Yes. Just if I can summarize what I took from that draft policy, or was that the competency determination would be passing 2 years of English, geometry, algebra, a science course, U.S. history, and passing a final exam portfolio or other locally determined summative sort of assessment. Is that approximately what?
Yes. Is that? Did you say U.S. history? Do you think that's a fair summary of the regulations?
I believe so, but I would want to
Go back
into it.
To say affirmed?
Yes.
And just clarifying that from my read, it seemed like it was both passing the course and passing a final, seemed to be a piece of that, of some sort. It
Yes.
didn't say it had to be a final exam.
Correct.
But of some sort.
Yes, yes. There needs to be an assessment.
Yeah.
That goes to that definition of mastery.
Yeah, okay.
Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Paul.
So Brian, what is the norm on the participation rate in the survey from parents and guardians? What is it usually?
We haven't ever done a survey like this, right? This is a very different type of survey than we've done. I would say in general, response from families, anyone is lower, right? I think it depends on the topic, it depends on the content. I think if it's asking a particular question about something that was going to impact an immediate change, it would solicit more of a response and a broader response. But with the students and the staff, they're taking it during the academic day, closed audience, captive audience. So in talking with Peter, this is low. This is not, I want to say we kind of more now toward like the 20% response rate. He said it's on the lower end, but it's not, he doesn't see, I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think there are 10 of the CPMSIE consortium groups that use the survey, but there's another, I forget the number, 15, 20 districts that are using the separate survey. And in general, response rate is not great. It's hard to engage. I think, and I'm hoping, when people see we ask the questions, we share the data, and we talk about how we're going to, celebrate the things we do well and improve in the areas we need to improve, and then ask again, right? That cycle hopefully breeds more response, and that the goal is a continuous improvement cycle. So I think from a first administration, it's not shockingly low.
Can I have a motion to receive and file the superintendent's report for March 2025?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The DCC update. This was primarily a budget update meeting going through the latest iterations of the budget proposals. The DCC agreed with the change of upcoming meetings to March 20th and April 10th. The next item is the FY26 final budget approval. Tonight, the superintendent is going to present the new budget document based on the final guidance that we provided last week. I want to also note that the town of Rowley sent a letter yesterday morning, and I will read that into the record when he finishes before I open up for the discussion.
Do you want to read that after? Okay. So every year when we get to this point, it feels like a marathon, right? We've been doing this almost weekly for a few months now. I'm not going to spend time going through the entirety of the document. I should say, too, Brian Perry is not able to be here tonight because of a death in the family, so we're sad to not have him here with us. This would have been his last meeting. Again, in a short while, I'll introduce you our interim Director of Finance and our long-term Director of Finance. So Brian should have been here tonight. Unfortunately, he's not, but it would have been his last meeting. So, we've been doing a lot of work on this, having a lot of discussions on the budget. And so when we get to this point in the cycle, there's no more presentations, there's no more, new information. It's a matter of making decisions. So the document you have before you aligns, as Linda just mentioned, aligns to the guidance that you gave last week after the public hearing. The changes from the tentative budget largely is that there's the narrative is now included, so there's 8 pages of explanation. So I do think it's important this year to just spend a little bit of time kind of talking through the process, what's next. This has been a unique year. And as far as what changes are included and what are not included in this final document. So starting on page 1, the document does just go through the overall context in which this budget is being discussed and approved. It has been confirmed that these figures through Neil Harrington, that this budget will be supported by the town of Salisbury as written. Both Newbury and Rowley will require an override. Rowley met on Monday night to have that discussion, joint select board and finance committee. I don't believe an exact override figure was voted, but they're clearly moving toward an override. Newbury met, same situation, select board and finance committee last night. Also had lots of discussion, didn't ultimately take a vote, but they have signaled that they're definitely moving toward an override. So the reality is the budget as you have it here tonight still includes some undesignated cuts that I'll go over quickly. But the assumed cuts in this budget are with the approval of 2 of our 3 towns. The reality is what we've always strived to do is have a budget that all 3 of our towns can support. That's become more challenging in recent years. And we've had years where we have 2 of 3 supporting in the 3rd town. It can be devastating on the finances of that town. However, the decision that you all make as a committee cannot be unique. So the decision you make cannot be something that varies from town to town. So the budget you decide, the number you decide, is apportioned based on a formula that we have no control over. And what that means for an assessment for each of the 3 towns cannot be controlled. So obviously, we spend a lot of time, the District Communications Committee, with town officials sitting around the table, talking about what towns can support, not support, override, no override. And so this isn't just a decision based on one town, but it's got to be the collective towns. And certainly, when there are some towns who have concerns about cutting deeper because it means deeper cuts in their own schools, if we're talking about the elementary, and then so they might support a higher number, and that certainly is a balancing act that you are all charged with. So the process for this year, you will approve a budget tonight. Generally speaking, you approve a budget in the middle of March, and we wait for town meetings. We go and attend, and it's largely been supportive of the budgets. This year, we have had a signal of one support, in that I should confirm, Neil Harrington saying that it is part of the budget still needs to be approved at town meeting. So there is the reality that town meeting could not take the recommendation and change their vote as well. So knowing that there are 2 overrides, or 2 of the 3 towns need an override, the soonest we will know is May 13th, which is Election Day in May. Newbury holds their town meeting on April 29th. Rowley holds their town meeting on May, it's the week before, I forget that, the first week of May. Election is the second week of May. Salisbury holds their town meeting the week following. They actually, the only town that holds their meeting after the election. So they will not be moving toward an override, so whatever happens at town meeting on the 19th for Salisbury is the decision. If one of the towns, if either Newbury or Rowley pass it at town meeting and an override, if one of them do, we're contingent on Salisbury's vote. If both fail, then we will know on May 13th that the budget is coming back to you, right? It's the mechanism, that their budget is returned to you for further consideration and reductions, and then it's resubmitted to the towns. The towns then have 45 days to hold another town meeting, if they so choose. If they do not hold another town meeting, it is an automatic yes vote. So if Salisbury passes the passes the budget by a vote at town meeting, that number would be higher than any assessment they would get with a further reduced budget. They've already been a yes, they've approved a higher figure, they're done. It would then be up to Rowley and Newbury, depending on the reductions that are made, whether or not they would want to hold another town meeting within 45 days, in essence, to have the electorate consider that. So that is certainly challenging for us to manage by way of personnel. As I've tried to lay out here with a little more clarity, there are 4 cuts that are included in this budget. We believe the balance of the savings can be made up either through additional Chapter 70 revenue, or circuit breaker revenue, lots of bills, lots of momentum about other stopgap funding. It's not going to be millions. It's not going to be likely hundreds of thousands, but 50,000 here, 75,000 there makes a difference. Obviously, we can have a situation with students and out of district change, for the better or for worse. So as we go through the next months, we'll have to make those determinations of how we close that gap for the existing budget. And then if the budget is passed as is, or is not passed as is, we would have to come back and have discussions about what those further reductions would be. So I would rephrase that sentence. We will know what those further reductions will be. Those will certainly be discussions we need to have at the April meeting, so that if we're having that budget returned in May following a unsuccessful override vote or non-passage in 2 towns, we're going to need to be ready. We're going to need to be ready to go. So this isn't a discussion that we can say we're just going to hold off and wait. We need to keep having those discussions. I don't know. We haven't talked about whether that's more meetings or what have you, but certainly we'll have to be ready to identify what those additional cuts would be. So that is a very different context than we've had in recent years. It certainly seems to be kind of growing, right? 5 years ago, we were in the midst of COVID and there was a different world, and we came out of COVID, and this has been kind of a steady progression toward more and more and more challenging budgets. And we didn't backfill our budget with a lot of one-time funding. There are a lot of districts who created a funding crisis through a lot of one-time funds used to generate an operating budget. That is not what we did. We did put a couple positions in. One of those, the district wellness coordinator, we included in this year's budget, and for next year's budget proposing that we can't support it. But we don't have millions or hundreds and hundreds of thousands of grant funding that's disappearing from COVID that we are having to backfill. So that is the context. That is the next steps. Again, a little different than we've had in recent years. Through the first 8 pages, tried to just tell the story of what changes are included in the budget. Again, we always tell that Chapter 70 story on page 2. updated. We have officially hit the district, or I'm sorry, Chapter 70 accounts for 17.5% of our total operating, when it accounted for 34% of our total operating 25 years ago. So that is 24 years ago. So that is a significant difference and a trend that is unfortunately continuing. So if I can take you to page 9, just to note the changes that are included in this document. So this is the two-pager you've seen all along. Tried to update it with a little more clarity. Took away the information about what was being originally proposed, and included, and this is just a summary of what is included in the budget. So as far as the schools, it is largely we're increasing supplies and materials as needed. Line number 1 and 5 lines down, the $85,000 is a transfer of a teacher, an existing teacher from Salisbury. That is one less classroom needed just through attrition and class sizes, and is moved over to Newbury to bring class sizes down in a particularly large kindergarten moving into first grade. A few sports, largely supplies and materials, some stipends, contractual. For student services, there are 2 positions that are added. The first 2, it is a half-time speech and language therapy assistant at $49,400. That is included in this budget. That is to deliver required services. And then the second line down for student services, it's actually adding funding to an existing RBT to make it a full BCBA. An RBT is the equivalent of a speech assistant for a BCBA. And so that would be housed at the REACH program to meet needs. A few lines down, you see a decrease in out-of-district tuitions of $383,000. That's a celebration, right? The reality is we've invested in in-district programs. We have them in each elementary school. We have them at the middle school and the high school. And so by developing those programs, they are not cheap, but they allow us to provide the services students need and deserve in our schools. Sometimes it means they're not in their home school, but they're within the district with district peers, and we're keeping them in the schools. In the cost savings, aside from the moral imperative why we should be doing it, the cost savings is significant when we're able to keep students in our own programs rather than paying individual tuitions and transportation. So I know we've talked about these special education increases in recent years, another half-time speech assistant, another BCBA, but the reality is that these are the positions that are allowing us to bring and keep these students in our schools. That doesn't mean every student can have their needs met in our schools. It's just the reality of how things go and the nature of students' needs. But more and more, we're looking to do the best we can to make sure our students are staying here in our schools. Curriculum is largely kind of moving some funding around for different uses. This does fund the final year of the Chromebook, so we have a 4-year rotation by next year, a line of $200,000. Every student always gets a new Chromebook, a new device in 1st, 5th, and 9th grade. This does include the investment in our OPEB trust fund. We talked about this repeatedly. When we look to borrow for the building project, whether it's a renovation, addition, or a rebuild of this campus, we will be borrowing the funds. As a regional school, it is not a town borrow, it is our borrow. And so the reason we put that policy into place 3 years ago, I guess now, was to improve our bond rating. And so we are making progress. The rating agencies have acknowledged that, and this continues that plan. This is the 3rd year of $75,000, so we are now contributing $150 to stabilization, and this is $75 to OPEB. Market corrections that we've talked about for all non-union, largely administrative staff at the school level and support staff. Community resource liaison, still there. Obviously, transportation increases. The insurance, we've talked about this repeatedly throughout the year, huge, over $1 million in healthcare insurance this year. insurance this year on the increase. So on our $2.5 million increase, or $2.3 million increase, over $1 million of that is coming from healthcare alone. So that is something that I'll talk about in a second with savings, but that is a huge driver for this year. The rest of there's what we've been talking about, COLAs and steps for all contracts. And then down the bottom, tried to paint this picture a little clearer, just about what we are pulling out of this budget. So we did mention that we are working with the Public Employee Committee on healthcare with all 4 of our bargaining units. They negotiate collectively. They've been phenomenal to work with. I just certainly want to say, give a shout out. They've been very responsive in coming to the table and having conversations. So there's a target of $300,000 in savings there. We're anticipating another $200,000 in circuit breaker revenue, which is the transportation component of circuit breaker. We anticipate that'll be fully funded. And then we have 3 cuts identified there. It's 2 special education teachers that we are cutting due to retirements. They show up on the middle school roster, and what we're doing is combining the middle and high school essentials and TLC program next year. Again, we will say this, we know we can do it next year. We anticipate as students age up the following year that we might need to add 1 teacher back, perhaps both of them back. But in the short term, we're able to meet the needs and stay within that 48-month gap or age span between students. We did cut the district wellness coordinator, and then it's 1 full FTE for a high school position that we've talked about that is currently unfilled, so that's not someone who is losing their job. The final, I'm calling that balance $350,000 as just a deficit. The number was over 400, but we had included the assistant facilities manager in there. That is no longer on the list of included items. I did put it in the narrative just to say this is something we've been talking about. Facilities are a topic we need to talk more about. So it's something that we want to keep on the radar, but it is not included in the budget. And so that 350, as we've said, is a gap we need to close, right? So just to be clear, if the overrides pass and the budget is approved, we still have to close that $350,000 gap. The reason why we're not being more clear at this moment is because of the potential for other revenues. If there is other Chapter 70 revenue that comes forward, or other circuit breaker revenue, or other revenues that we're not aware of, if charter funding improves or the numbers on our calculation get better. So there's other ways that throughout the budget process that our state aid funding could improve. We want to make sure that that remains a nimble number. But we do, and I say this confidently, whether it be through talking through that delayed implementation of a science curriculum or the 2 bus runs that are not currently running and we desperately need, one for Salisbury, one for Rowley, not replacing them. There's $150,000 on the table, or not budgeting for them. So there are other ways that we believe we can close that deficit without any further staff cuts beyond the 4 FTEs that are identified here. That's important, right, to be able to say to our newer staff who are going to feel like they're on the chopping block, we don't want them out looking for jobs, we want them here. But the reality is we can give certainty with this figure in what you're proposing to the towns to approve, but without the approval of 2 of the 3 towns, there would be additional cuts, again, a yet to be determined amount, but I don't know where we would go beyond those items that wouldn't include staffing at that point. So any questions about all of that, any of that? So then just, again, I'm not going to read through it, but just orienting you to the rest of the budget. Pages 11 and 12 are the calculation breakdown. There's no mystery behind it. Page 12 literally is the statutory formula, which is what our regional agreement says. We have no option to determine how our budget figures get assessed to member towns. The capital breakdown. I do want to say on page 13, there is an assumption of an offset of $90,000 out of our E&D to the stadium account. By agreement, when we were looking to fund the stadium privately, and the town stepped up and said they would be willing to bond that, or approve the bond of that. We agreed that if our E&D is certified above $500,000, that we would contribute $90,000 towards that. Going into this fall, we believed that our E&D would be certified above that. Unfortunately, we just got that back this week, and there are a bunch of other things that DOR is subtracting from that total. We can keep fighting it, but I'm not sure we're going to win. So it was certified right around $400,000. My recommendation is we keep that $90,000 there. I don't think at this point in the process we can say to the towns, oh, and by the way, we're going to pull that $90,000 out too and float assessments up another $90,000. But that is eating at our E&D. So with that 90 taken out, that leaves us with roughly $300,000 in E&D. Again, we do now have stabilization. We were in a different world having stabilization than we were previously, but did want to note that on page 13 there with the stadium assessment. Enrollments that drive the calculations on page 14, class projections on page 15, a couple different ways of summary on the following pages, and then you can just follow through school by school, district-wide, line by line. No mysteries about where the money is. It's broken out line by line. You have 3 years of history, 3 years of actual history, the current adjusted budget, and then the new request and the differences. So I will leave it at that. Happy to answer any questions if there are any, or engage in a discussion.
I'm going to read the letter from Rowley. We are writing to you on behalf of the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee regarding the proposed FY 26 $54 million Triton budget. The town of Rowley, over the past few years, has repeatedly urged the school committee to prepare budgets that reflect the limitations imposed under the Proposition 2.5 law. The town doesn't have unlimited financial resources to give to the school. Unfortunately, the proposed assessment of $14,365,798, which reflects an increase of $1,673,000, or 7.54%, is unsustainable for Rowley, and it will require the town to consider a Proposition 2.5 override. The Triton annual operating budget continues to go up by millions of dollars under a level service budget model. Yet the reality is that the student enrollment has dropped by hundreds over the past several years. A level service budget needs to also factor in the number of students it services. Budgets shouldn't be increasing by millions year after year when the enrollment consistently decreases. The need for the town to consider a Proposition 2.5 override should not be a surprise to you. Since last year, we sent a letter alerting you that we will not be able to continually absorb these increases without holding a Proposition 2.5 override to support the Triton operational budget. FY 24 assessment increased $991,965. FY 25 assessment $771,217. The FY 26 assessment increased tentative budget $1,663,673. State minimum required assessments for Rowley is $8,200,737. Triton is assessing Rowley an additional $6,165,061 over that amount. With the town now in this predicament, our thoughts about supporting the Triton School Building Project is altered. Any consideration of supporting this project on our part will require a change of budget policy on your part. That factors in limitations of Proposition 2.5 enrollment and staffing levels that are comparable to other regional districts. Thank you for your consideration of our request. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Okay, so that is the letter from Rowley. And I just would like to say something right now that, you know, in years past, we've had Narissa as the chair and myself as the chair, and we've gone through great lengths to have better communications and better relationships with our towns. I think we've proven that to our towns. When Narissa and I, as well as Brian last year, went to Rowley and Salisbury to discuss our budgets, to explain why things were being cut or things were being added. And we've also said that we would do it again this year. We have DCC meetings that we have discussions. Upon discussions, open communication, I always say that that's the best place to have these discussions. We've had these discussions. So to hear that we're not listening is unfair. The 9 people around this table, we have 3 subcommittees that we work diligently, and all our work for the school committee is done in those 3 meetings. And we do a lot of work. We look at everything from finances to advocacy to our states, to policies, to negotiations with our teachers and contractors. I just am sad to see that they feel that we don't listen. We talk to our state legislators. We had them here last week telling them the issues we have at Triton. We try to get the state, the towns, and the school to come together so that people understand the challenges that the towns have as well as the school has. It is a challenging year, I agree 100%. But the towns and the schools need to go to the people to ask them what it is that they want for their towns and their schools.
I watched the Raleigh Joint Committee meeting twice, and most of the Salisbury Select Board meeting from Monday, as much as the Newbury Joint meeting last night that I could catch live, in addition to reading the letter that the Raleigh chairs of the Select Board and the Finance Committee sent. I was struck by how very, very different these meetings were. I don't want to call out specific statements because this should be about boards and not individual members' views. I am one of 9, and in the end, my views don't matter as a single person, but the school committees as a whole do, and that is true for all the other boards and their members. I do want to talk about a few general points. I want to agree with Linda. We feel the pain of the towns. We serve the whole community. We're taxpayers. In some cases, we're parents of students. Empathy, carrying the weight of how decisions affect everyone, is something I personally feel every day. I think it's tremendously difficult to listen on other people's conversations where the conception seems to be that you just don't care. I want to reiterate that this is not a level services budget. It does include cuts, as the superintendent just explained again. This proposal was discussed in the last DCC and at the public hearing. So getting a letter yesterday morning, I think it's difficult timing given the ultimatum that's in that letter. I wanted to note that the district is required to provide services and supports that students are legally entitled to, including special education services and Title I supports. When Triton has a number of similarly aged students that share a specific need, we've been working to launch more programs in district because it's usually better for the student and more cost-effective for the district than having the student go to a specialized school where Triton pays the tuition. These programs all vary district to district and affect the ratio of the number of students to the number of teachers for each district, which I know has been floating around online and is mentioned in the Raleigh letter. Considering actual classrooms instead, the statewide average for students per classroom is just over 17, and Triton and most of the area K-12 districts run just north or south of 16 students per classroom. I wish the conversation had been live because the number that Raleigh boards used in the conversation is not representative of what's happening in our classrooms. And cutting to just increase the student to staff ratio would be counterproductive to decreasing the budget in a variety of ways. I will note the number of classrooms and course sections has dropped over the years, is dropping again this year, though that cost savings has been offset by other expenses rising. I wanted to make 2 notes specific to the Raleigh letter in the meeting. I watched the meeting twice and the letter vote section once more. I went back after I saw the letter to make sure I understood what was communicated. The letter issues an ultimatum at the end, and that was not included in the description Chair Nealon provided verbally prior to the vote on the letter. There were a couple of members who did voice this sentiment, and others who spoke supportively of the building project during the meeting. I'm honestly not sure what to make of the fact that the letter includes the ultimatum that was not discussed as part of the letter vote at the meeting. Also, at the meeting, the Raleigh assessor provided a Prop 2.5 plus new growth number of just under $900,000. I'd mentioned during several previous meetings that the revenue growth factor for Raleigh in the Chapter 70 formula this year was among the highest in the state, and the worksheet showed the calculation for that, showing the calculation for that number just came out, showing about $500,000 more growth for Raleigh than what was stated at the meeting. I'm not going to slander anyone for that, so I wanted to go find out why that was, that it was stated as essentially $1.4 million for Department of Revenue and roughly $900,000 in the meeting. I went down to see the principal assessor yesterday and asked if he could provide an explanation as to why. In spring of 2023, at Raleigh's town meeting budget vote, the Finance Committee recommended, and the town meeting followed their recommendation, to short the Raleigh assessment for the Triton budget by about $500,000. By $500,000, I should say. It seemed likely at the time that the Triton budget would pass in Newbury and Salisbury and be approved, meaning that Raleigh would be required to pay the full assessment amount anyway, but it was intended to be in a statement. When the Triton budget was approved as expected, that $500,000 the town was short then had to be built into the Raleigh budget with the revenue to offset it. That's the difference between their number at the meeting and what the Department of Revenue has in the worksheet, and it makes Raleigh's growth look artificially high. The Department of Revenue high growth number is what's used in the Chapter 70 calculation, resulting in a $247,000 increase to Raleigh's assessment this year before Triton's budget even went up $1. Looking at what a more normal growth trend would yield, it appears that over $200,000 of the $247,000 that Raleigh went up immediately could be contributed to the town compensating for this vote. Without it, Raleigh's assessment would probably have started at more like $30,000 to $40,000 above the baseline. That was the effect this year, and if that was it, I might not have brought this before the committee since our budget's being voted tonight, and in theory, it should have no further effect. Unfortunately, though, when I was talking with the assessor, he told me that the Department of Revenue formula uses a 3-year average. So it's likely that Raleigh's assessment will be affected by this one high figure skewing the average for another 2 years, even though the annual numbers will drop back down. In an effort to have a full picture of what's coming, I felt like this was important to share, and I wanted to thank Sean, the assessor, for taking the time to explain this. I made a motion from the floor of the town meeting in 2023 for the full amount, and I wish I had fought for this harder. I said this to Sean yesterday. I had no concept of these consequences, but the impact that it's going to have now and for the next 2 years on both the Raleigh budget and the Triton budget is significant. I'm usually the one who tries to look ahead, the one who tries to avoid these things by seeing them coming, and I didn't avoid this. I wish I had fought harder, and I'm sorry that I didn't, even though this wasn't, an issue that I caused. I wish we had been able to prevent it because I didn't know it was going to have this type of a consequence.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, I've been told I don't listen. Did you say that move cost them $200,000?
That is the way, yeah. So my understanding is that they had to increase their revenue. So this is, again, my understanding. I got in there a short time before they closed, so it was not a totally in-depth conversation. But my understanding is the same way that Brian's, has in this budget, saying that, circuit breaker transportation, he's got a higher estimate now than we originally had, because we believe with further information, we can estimate closer to that, what an actual number will be, and increase that a little bit. That Raleigh actually did that in multiple categories for their revenues. So I mean, I have the numbers right here. So in fiscal '24, they estimated $870,000 for motor vehicle excise tax, and then they bumped it up to 1.175, which is closer my understanding is to where it gives them less wiggle room, right? If it comes in low, they're going to be in trouble. If it comes in where it usually does, which is apparently close to that 1.175, they'll be sort of right on the money. Increasing that number made Rowley look in the Department of Revenue calculation that goes into Chapter 70 like they experienced 7.28% of growth this year, which is the number I kept calling out earlier this year, saying Rowley looks like they've got a ton of new growth. They are one of the top 10 in the state as far as the percentage. I didn't know why. I couldn't tell the municipal revenue growth factor sheet when it came out is what I took down and got the explanation on. So my understanding is that when we were saying Rowley is getting a $247,000 increase largely because they look richer, like they can afford more on paper, that is driven by increasing revenues to compensate for that $500,000 underfunding that happened 2 years ago. And I don't want to hold like anyone to, I blame myself, right? It obviously wasn't my idea. I didn't know about it until the town meeting warrant came out, but I always hold myself to being the person that sees these things coming and sort of sounds the alarm. I wish I had said something earlier. I wish I had been louder on the town meeting floor. In my mind, I thought the consequence was that the vote was going to pass elsewhere. The budget was going to pass. Rowley was going to have another town meeting and vote that $500,000. I didn't see it impacting us down the road. I didn't see it impacting Rowley down the road. And unfortunately, that's what has happened. Normally, like, I'm not one to hash out stuff in public. I am not one to go after other boards. I'm not one to judge anything online other than, or in person, other than what we're doing as a school committee. But this one, we need to plan for this next year, and we need to plan for this the year after in Rowley's assessment, because according to what Sean told me, it's going to continue to hit until it gets out of that 3-year average, because they have this very high number that's going to be sitting in there and affecting those.
I just want to say, Marissa, you're not in the Finance Committee of Rowley. You're not the Select Board of Rowley. You're not the Assessor of Rowley. You're one person who a lot of people look towards for numbers. However, Rowley has to take some ownership of this, which makes the letter even harder for me to take, because at last night's meeting, or Monday night's meeting, they were very hard on this board, very hard on Brian. And like I've always said, we need to work with the towns, not against each other, because no way is either one of us going to win if we do that. I always say it takes a village, and it certainly does. We have to be together with the state trying to get out of this. So I understand that you're taking a lot of this on yourself, but when that budget was being done, you brought up that they should be funding the whole thing, and they decided not to listen to the person who, in my opinion, knows the most about the school budgets and helps even our Rowley assessor with some of their numbers as well. So I don't want Narissa feeling that the reason why Triton is where we are and Rowley is where we are is because it's on her. That is not fair.
Agreed.
Matthew?
So, wow. Anyway, to get down to where Rowley wants us to be in their letter, how much more would we have to cut, and what would that do to Newbury's and Salisbury's assessment? Oh, I don't have anything else to say.
Please use your microphone.
Sorry. And I need somebody to,
Oh, you're getting yelled at.
I know, I'm getting yelled at over the mic. I might need somebody to refresh my memory, but the number that Rowley came with us originally that they could afford was 247. Was that?
No, they said they couldn't. They said that they couldn't fund 2025 again if they had to do it.
Okay, so they.
Couldn't fund, they couldn't pay the current bill again.
Okay.
I think it's like 1.5. And I think it's going to drastically lower Newbury and Salisbury's assessment.
When you say the number included in the letter, you're talking about 2.5%.
Half of new growth and 2.5%. Right, so that's what, 440 or something?
Is that included in their letter? I don't see that in the letter.
I mean, I read the letter several times. There wasn't a number like the other two towns usually give us. But I kind of, reading between the lines, that sounds what they want us to do. Right, because what do you have for new growth? And, sorry.
No, yeah, the number Sean gave me that he said was actual new growth yesterday was like 870. I don't know if I have it written down here anywhere.
So
This isn't right. That's how
Okay.
that's what they filed. So I don't, and it well, actually it includes the extra 500,000. So it would be it would be 868,000 roughly.
So if we
How
cut,
would the alternative assessment discussion affect this if they were willing to open the discussion with all the towns again?
If there was an alternative assessment,
How would that affect Rowley over the next few years if they were able to get to some sort of agreement?
I mean, it would depend on what the assessment was, right? We talked about when we started kind of looking at other assessments and what they could do, they can be simpler, so they're easier to understand for the population, because obviously the current formula is not terribly easy. It takes Brian a full page to map it out in the budget. They can smooth the sort of highs and lows. So, I mean, even in the numbers that Rowley showed on Monday night, they had lows where they were at like 0.6% increase, right? And then it would jump way up, right? It can make it more predictable. So, if you're trying to plan ahead, you can kind of choose factors for your formula that would allow you to do a much better job of planning 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead, whatever you wanted to do. I think the issue that we ran into when we were having the alternative assessment calculations is that they strongly prized in that list it being very simple. Right? And when you try to make it super simple, you sort of lose the capacity to address some of those other items. So it can't be all of the things that an alternative assessment could do for you and check every single one of those boxes. You can only check some of those boxes. They were, everyone that was involved in those meetings from the towns were strongly in favor of it having been very simple. They wanted something that they could explain to their voter base very easily, which is totally understandable, but that basically eliminates the ability to have it sort of mute these high increases or decreases that Raleigh's feeling. Could you come to a formula that would sort of negate what happened in the municipal revenue growth factor? You could. Would it be simple? Probably not. So, and that's where we kept getting stuck. Unless, I think, Raleigh and Newbury had a valid feeling that we couldn't go any farther. The reason we couldn't go any farther was because when you're basing it on those criteria, and those criteria are a must-have for you, there's only so many options that you can consider. We considered all of those, none of them worked. And that's why we set those conversations aside.
So just to clarify, if we cut 1.5 million out, the total net, it would be an increase in the budget of 950,000, right? That nets 790 because of that 159,544. Newbury's increase would be 99,662. Salisbury's would be 78,882, and Rowley's would be 455,011.
And how much, I mean, that's like a 1.5% increase on assessments? So you can't even stay under 2.5 realistically?
Right, 0.8% in Newbury, literally 0.5% in Salisbury yields a 3.4% increase for Rowley. And that's
I mean, that would be devastating, would it not?
1.5 million?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Roughly how many teachers? When you figure in unemployment and all the other things you have to consider?
Best case scenario? 100,000 per. So best case scenario, 15. It's more like, it's when you offset for unemployment and depending on health insurance and what packages are being taken, it's probably more 20 plus.
I'm sorry, 20 plus?
20 plus individuals. Yeah.
And just to go back to the assessments is, Narissa was willing to have that committee again to possibly come up with other factors to calculate a new assessment, an alternative assessment. But Rowley and Newbury voted on their boards not to participate in the meetings. Salisbury voted to continue because you had nothing to lose trying to come up with an alternative assessment that would work for all three towns.
And with the process, wouldn't it take far too long anyway? We did have to be approved at town meetings and then go to the state. So by the time that process played out, yeah.
But still, it's still an exercise that I feel should always be on the table when we're talking about the three towns being able to know their budget in October if we had an alternative assessment. It's a tough budget year. I'm not saying it's not. But this is not the way to go about it. Is there anybody that has any other comments? I want to thank this board for the hard work that we do to try and come up with a budget. Our job is just as hard as the selectmen's. None of our jobs are easy because we all have people to answer to and people to care for, whether it be our students or our people of our towns. Again, all 9 of us vote, all 9 of us are taxpayers in these 3 towns. I want to thank the administration as well for the budget. I know it's not easy.
I guess without further comment, going to Matt's numbers, I don't see how we would cut to the point of getting Rowley out of an override situation if they can't afford at that first district communication meeting that we had, Sherry said they couldn't afford a $247,000 increase. We would devastate the district trying to get down to that number. I don't know. Again, I brought this not to, I guess, I don't know. I don't like the timing, right? I wish I had been able to tell you this weeks ago. I got the numbers yesterday. and had the conversation yesterday. I don't want to blame anyone for this, right? This shouldn't affect, what happens with this really shouldn't affect anything in our deciding on our budget. I don't think we can get down to where Rowley wouldn't have an override. I guess I don't know where we go from here other than stay where we're at, right? See what comes out with the votes, and then adjust from there if we have to.
I did speak to the chairs of the select boards, telling them that I believe the school committee and the select boards, and then asked our legislators to be there with us at the Council of Aging. And it isn't just about the people of the Council of Aging. I felt that that was the building to go to make it easy for the elderly people in all three towns. We know they can get to those buildings. It's to invite anyone in those communities that want to come and have a conversation, to let them know the challenges we have at the schools, the towns, have the legislators explain what they're doing to help the towns and the schools, so that the people in those towns can understand what our challenges are. And again, it's going to be up to the people of those towns what kind of school they want to have and what kind of town services they want to have. That I believe the select boards and the schools have done everything that we can to get a number that we can all live with, but it's going to be on the towns to decide what they want to do. So after we vote this number, in the next few days, I will get a hold of those three chairs again to try and schedule those meetings in the three different towns. I'm not sure what else we can do, but as the chair of this committee, that is what I am proposing to do. I don't know if it will make a difference or not, but I guess it can't hurt. I'm all about making sure that all of us are in this together. I've always said that at our DCC meetings, that us and the towns have to be together, as well as the people of those towns. They shouldn't resent the school, and they shouldn't resent this select board. The rising cost is everywhere. And the towns the town people have to decide what school they want and what community they want. Does anybody else have any other comments or concerns? I know there's a lot of concerns, but comments? Did you give her the number? Did you give?
Make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2026 final budget of $54,503,289, including both operating and capital debt costs, with a total operating expenditure of $54,233,695 and capital expenditure of $269,594, resulting in combined assessments to the communities of $43,610,103 to be apportioned per the regional agreement, and with the remaining balance of $10,803,185 being funded by other state and local revenues.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Opposed, abstaining, or a no, I don't know which.
Opposed.
Oh, sorry. All those opposed? Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what's next. The next item is the 2025-2026 school year calendar. This should be short.
So I think we can make this brief. We've had a lot of discussion about this. You have in your packet two calendars, one with PD days where they have been on Fridays, and then you have one with them modeled on Wednesdays. The only change from the original proposal with, that included Fridays is moving the January 9th to January 16th away from the first week return from the New Year's holiday. So I guess the one thing I will say is I know we've had discussion about, we proposed the Fridays. There was discussion about the value of Wednesdays. I believe there is value in Wednesdays. I also believe there's value in giving the PD committee an opportunity to consider all the options. That was not something that the PD committee endeavored to talk to staff about and teachers. And so when Anna brought it back to the PD committee, it was, there was not, the group did not want to move forward with Wednesdays, not because they don't believe Wednesdays is the right choice, but because we haven't had that discussion internally yet with all of our educators. So the discussions had been around the original proposal on the Fridays. And so, so my recommendation is to approve the Fridays as it was originally presented, except for that one adjustment in January. And that would be something that I know when Anna's speaking with principals, there was a discussion around other opportunities. Is it, I think someone had mentioned it, late arrival, right? I mean, that's, I think it could work really well. I did a quick poll of area superintendents, and they're all over the place, right? The number of days, how the days are used, a lot on Wednesdays, some on Thursdays, some on Tuesdays, some on Fridays. I don't think anyone does Mondays. It varies from 4 of them to every other week to every week. Some do an hour and a half every week. Some do the full half days. So I just don't believe that we'll be in a place to roll that out. I don't know if you want to say anything, Anna, but based on the discussion with the PD committee, I don't believe we should move forward at this point.
I think you summarized that well, that there were, I think the members of the PD committee, but primarily the principals were they were considering the value of that and how do we increase the value of our professional learning time, and thinking that we really need to unpack that as a group. And if it's about attendance, we need to really kind of dig in and get to the root of that. And if it's about sort of investment in it, we have to dig in and get to the root of that. But really kind of figure out what's the problem we're trying to solve before we solve it. And then a lot of ideas were, some ideas were presented as maybe we could try a late start, and do we have time to explore that as an option? And I'm trying to think of what else sort of I took from this. I think just sort of the challenge in, the challenge that we've talked a lot about how to support such a diverse group of educators with meaningful professional development, and that is something we're committed to doing and want to figure out how to do it better. There was some discussion as well about a change to Wednesdays may create other challenges that we haven't anticipated, such as a sort of a midweek break for the students, and what impact is that going to have not having that full day on Wednesday, and how are they going to re-engage on Thursday. So I think all important things to kind of think about and to talk about and have thoughtful discussions about before we move forward with the change.
I'm not going to say that I disagree with you. However,
you're allowed to.
However, I know this is supposed to be short, but in the discussions we had about this, I think one of the comments was that it was said that Wednesdays might be a more refreshing day and able for educators to have a half a day in the middle of the week. I'm okay if you have all these reasons why, but it can't, it's March. There's so many months before September when the first PD day is, that we could have those discussions if the administration felt that the Wednesday was the best. I agree that Fridays are easy for people because it's the end of the week, but it all comes down to what is best for professional development for the district. And I'm not trying to be not thinking about staff or students or families, but at the end of the day, the professional development is for professional development for teachers for the district. And whether it's attendance on Fridays or whatever it is, I believe it's up to the administration to make sure that people are attending that. That should never be an issue of people not attending professional development because it can only help them. So I don't know how other people feel, but I feel it should stay on Wednesdays, but I'm only one of 9, so whatever the will of the committee is.
Can I just clarify one thing? So I don't think either Anna or I would disagree, but when you say it's up to the administration, we rely on heavily on our work with principals. And because this was never a topic of discussion of the routine meetings throughout the year, right? Anna's meeting with principals and the PD committee throughout the year. So it was a brand new concept. And when we said, are we ready for this next year? The answer was, we're not ready yet. We want to explore options. It may absolutely be. I still think it's a fresher day. I don't think it's going to solve attendance problems. I think we have to attack that separately and concurrently. So could we end up on Wednesdays? Absolutely. Do I think probably? Yes. But I'm not ready to recommend and say that we as an administrative team, not Anna and me, but with principals and everyone collectively, that we're ready to say, we're ready to jump next year. If everyone was on board and felt like, yes, absolutely, then I agree with your point about between now and September, we have plenty of opportunity to educate people. The administrative team is not yet in agreement that it's the best choice. So that's the difference.
I just would like to ask, whether it's on Friday or on when, I don't think having a later start I think that's more detrimental to families trying to figure out how.
Coming in late.
Coming
Yep,
in later.
yep.
I think that's more detrimental. Moving from a Friday afternoon to a Wednesday afternoon, I'm not saying it's not hard for families, but it's still a half a day that you would have to account for, whether it was a Friday or a. Having a later start is absolutely a whole different change for families, and they may not be able to do that, because I imagine a lot of them would struggle with that. So my question is, you have to plan for Friday half days anyways. So what's the difference of the Friday half day, planning for it, and getting ready for it opposed to Wednesday? I think that's just the part that I struggle with, is you still have PD day that week.
Yeah, I don't think it's the plan. It's the impact on the rest of the week that, and I don't want to, you had a direct conversation with the principals, but I know you sent me all those notes about all this stuff, right? It was all about that may be, but the reality is how it impacts the overall culture and ethos of a building. That changes things. And so if we land there, yes, I don't think any principal was like, absolutely no.
Right.
But it was just brand new and like, oh, hadn't considered that. Let's think about it. So now that we're here in March and we usually do this in February, had we had a discussion in September and said, hey, let's look at Wednesdays, we would have been ready to make a recommendation in February.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is there any others? Yes.
To say that I think in terms of effective PD day, Wednesday afternoon is absolutely going to be more effective in training teachers and IAs to do their job better in the ways that you want to do than Friday afternoons. I really don't think there's any question about that. In terms of, to your point, the the ethos. I think after 2, the schools will have shifted, because it's just a new routine, and you adapt to a new routine fairly quickly unless there's significant reasons that you can't. And I think the difference between PD Day on Friday, PD Day on Wednesday, PD Day on Monday, you're going to have individuals who are positively or negatively affected in some way in any of those days, but they roughly balance out. And right now, we're in the routine of Fridays, but if we shift by November of next year, we'll be in the routine of Wednesdays, and we will roughly have the same number of people who are feeling pressures in the negative direction that we are now. I don't think those change very much. It's nibbling around the edges. But in terms of the PD, I think it's absolutely more effective on Wednesday. I feel like I want to plan this, I want to understand this, I want to control it, I want to explore options, but I feel like we've talked about this at these meetings 3 or 4 of the last 5 years. So it's also something we've been thinking about, and as a committee shifted this year, was what I heard around the table the last couple of meetings. So.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that is working in a district where PD is on a Wednesday. I definitely agree that I think it is definitely more beneficial. And it would be interesting to look at when you, like, say, maybe a concern with students, those not coming in the middle of the week as opposed to a Friday. It'd be interesting to look, because it is the middle of the week, if actually there'd be fewer absences as opposed to families thinking, oh, let's just take a long weekend because it's on a Friday. But that's just a kind of a side note.
I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing you say like they felt like it was a surprise. But we have talked about PD days, issues surrounding, I think I've been sitting here for 5 years, and this has been a conversation. We've identified that, when we moved to Fridays, we thought it would make changes, shift things. I'm not sure it shifted things better or worse, but we're still having those exact same conversations that Anna just outlined that the leadership team wants to have again. So I'm struggling with, there's got to be a balance there of like, we're identifying their issues, we know there are conversations that need to be had. Do we need the rest of this year, the summer, and all of next year to really have that conversation when it was previously on Wednesdays? Nope, what day was it on?
It's never been on a Wednesday.
No, what day was it on?
It was on Friday and then Monday.
It's been Fridays and Mondays.
Mondays. So
it was on Fridays, and then we were told that the teachers wanted it on Monday, so we moved it to Monday, and then they said they didn't care for it, so we moved it back to Friday.
Is that what happened? I can't remember the exact, but I remember we've shifted it a few times. I'm just struggling to see how it would change a building ethos, because we don't know. Like, I guess we didn't know what would happen when we moved it to Fridays. We're seeing a few concerns, a few issues. I don't know. I think Wednesdays, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think we've had those exact same conversations throughout the years. And at some point, we need to put it into practice and then coincide a different strategy to build up those other issues that aren't being fixed by the day move. Because it's really disheartening to hear that, Friday's just not the best day for teacher learning, and I get that. Friday after, I don't think any one of us has a great meeting on a Friday afternoon. I don't know about you, but when somebody puts a 2 o'clock meeting on my Friday, I'm not, it's tough. So I would maybe like to see it move quicker than a year plus. How many months left in the school year? For my 34 months. I would like to see it move quicker, because those conversations are going to happen endlessly. They've been happening for more than 5 years, so.
So I think this committee is really gifted because the three people to my left are either educators or former educators. And when they unequivocally say that it should go to a Wednesday, I defer to them.
Is there anybody else that has any concerns or?
I've already voiced mine last meeting, so I'm not going to take time to repeat them this meeting.
So, how many people would like to see it on a Wednesday?
You actually have to vote, like motion and vote one of these calendars. This is a formal.
Make a motion to approve the 2025-2026 school year calendar as presented as draft V2 for Wednesday professional development.
Aaron?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
All right, play the calendar.
We went out of. Okay. So appointment of Director of Finance and Operations. Triton's current Director of Finance and Operations, Brian Perry, has turned in his resignation. He wasn't able to be here tonight, but we wish him luck in the future. Dave Verdolino, sorry.
You got it.
That's good.
Who had been mentoring Brian Perry, is thankfully willing to step up and as an interim director for now, and the superintendent has been carrying out the search for someone permanent and is going to present his nomination.
Maybe we should have done the order differently after the budget discussion and all that. Still good, Rich? Still coming? Okay, still coming. So again, I mentioned earlier, Brian Perry wasn't able to be here. This would have been his last meeting. He's been here for a year. As we've talked about, he transitioned in from the non-education world and decided it wasn't the right fit, so he's transitioning back to the municipal side. To start off, Dave Verdolino has stepped in and will be starting effective Monday as our interim Director of Finance and Operations. Dave was in Medway for 19 years after being an auditor for many years, and then was the Executive Director of MASBO for a short stint, and then went back and retired as the Assistant Superintendent of Finance, Director of Finance and Operations for Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. So knows the school finance world, even more importantly, knows the regional school finance world because it is a beast unto itself. So Dave, as I said, will be here effective Monday as our Director of Finance and Operations on an interim basis. He was in today, meeting with people. He's been in a couple times, but started the transition in. I don't know, do you want to say anything, Dave, or is that good?
Pause.
Can we pause? Sure.
We're going to do a furniture move.
Sorry, what?
I think they should.
We're going to move the furniture.
Oh, okay.
Roll in a table, roll up some chairs.
Oh, nice. They're going to grill them. Awesome.
I was going to say, it's kind of weird.
Oh, you're both getting on the same?
Well, if they want you guys each at the table?
Well, we kind of wanted the white one. I like that one, it's more fun. Okay.
No.
Sorry, Anna. I don't want to put you on it, but I'm very
We just take this out?
We use this one. We got this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
having nothing to do with it.
No, it is nice. I think we have one of them, or two of them.
We want to make you feel welcome here. So you're not in the fire line, we just would like you to sit comfortably.
So am I starting over? So Dave Vernolino. So I won't say it again, but I don't know, Dave, if you want to say anything. I appreciate Dave stepping up. Again, hired him as Brian's mentor. Any new administrator in Massachusetts has to have a mentor. And so when we knew the transition was happening, I said, so Dave, interested in doing a little, he retired, coming out of retirement, and then certainly, I don't know if you want to share anything.
Yeah. I'll repeat one thing that was said in my presence at a budget subcommittee meeting, which was part of the discussion with Brian about having me come in and be an interim was, yeah, it's a really good time of year, as you know. Yeah, the spring, bringing it to the finish line, so to speak, is typically a decent time of year. And Dave, the budget will be all set. There won't be any controversies. You'll be able to come in.
I remember that conversation.
This was the date. Oh, they'll have the budget voted, and you just kind of carry it to June 30th, and there'll be no problems with that. And so I will say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will say that having never worked with Brian, but knowing of him and his abilities, he was one of us once upon a time, and I felt proud that Brian came to me and I guess sought me out as somebody who he thought could help here, and and so I wanted to do it. And just one other thing, I have experience with the Triton Regional School District in the time when, as Brian said, I used to audit cities and towns, and my client list includes, you can look it up, Triton Regional School District in the late 80s, and early 1990s, I have been here. So there's a little bit of history that, oh yeah, Triton, I remember them. Triton was my experience to get into AB, because they said, do you have any regional experience? Well, yeah, I audited Triton Regional.
Long ago.
So, long ago. So, thank you for the introduction. Looking forward to working with you, and hopefully it's not fraught with unfortunateness and uncertainty, but I look to leave things in good shape for my successor, who amazingly is being hired in my presence before I even start officially on the job.
So on that point, I appreciate you bringing that up, Dave, because when we went down this path, I wasn't sure, first of all, when Brian tendered his resignation a few months ago, started the search process. We've talked about this position. We've had quite a bit of turnover in this position. It is not unique that we had turnover in this position. There are positions open in, I think, North Andover and Newburyport, and right there, it's kind of everywhere. So when the world aligned, and I thought all three of them would be here tonight, the current, the interim, and the future, it really did work out well, so that we have 3.5 months for Dave to come in the interim role. He's been learning kind of our systems and processes, kind of come in with an experienced eye, and having lived through this and almost an evaluation as well as keeping the ship afloat. You'll see him at finance committee meetings and school committee meetings, but really doing that work to transition. And also at the same time, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Richard Poore, who after conducting a process, I met with him twice. He then came in for an interview with a full panel. Narissa sat on that from the school committee, a bunch of other administrators and staff who said absolutely yes. I had a follow-up interview with him and ultimately we agreed for him to join us here. So this is a unique opportunity for us to have Dave come in with the experience, and from the get-go, I know Rich is anxious to get going, but to have that opportunity between now and June 30th to effectively transition over. So to introduce Richard to you, Richard is currently the principal at Cosentino Middle School in Haverhill. He follows a similar path to mine, other than the military. Starting the military, you have his resume in front of you, and then becoming a teacher, and then an assistant principal, and now moving into the school business official function. He is a collector of degrees, BA, MED, MPA, CAGS, and doctorate. And are we still doing one? Is that what we said?
All
No.
done.
All done. Oh, yeah. For the moment, because I got some stuff for you to do. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any questions you have of Rich, but I'm excited. All of the conversations with him in checking references about him in our conversation with the committee, an incredible hard worker, will learn anything and everything very quickly. And I think what I'm most excited about is we have a very good operation with an accountant, facilities, payroll, support. To have someone come in who has been a building principal in a middle school of 850-plus students, and to come in understanding all of the operational side of the house and managing a staff that large, student body that large, and then translate that in to the work of being the Director of Finance and Operations. It's not an accountant. We have an accountant. Karen Denon, as you all know, is an amazing accountant. This work is really about the high-level picture and maintaining a high-level view of the work we do across 5 schools, 600-plus thousand square feet of facilities, and 450-plus employees. So I'm excited for that perspective. I'm excited for what he'll bring to the role. What else should I say? Are there any questions? I think you should interview him.
Yes, I have a question. Mr. Bertolino, thank you very much for being the interim. He did tell you the buses are part of your job?
Do
you want to say it, or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I should say, requested that they remain with the role. So part of the discussions, as I've been speaking with Rich over a month and a half, part of this budget discussion was to pull away the operations side and have it be a director of finance. Ultimately, I never liked that, right? It was about separating the roles to make sure that the job is doable. The job is big as the director of finance and operations, but ultimately, I believe, and in speaking with Rich, he believes that it really is vested best with the director of finance and operations because it's such an integral part of the operation, getting kids to and from school. Working as principal in Haverhill, he has experience with NRT, so it is not a foreign relationship there, and so I'm excited about that. But this job is a big job, right? And the reality is, it is a significant role, and so that is, Rich is coming in with eyes fully wide open.
So you're okay with that, right?
Yes.
They literally, it's going to be an interrogation to make sure.
The other thing is in our new contract, NRT, is we have penalties in there. So I just want to know what you're going to do to make sure that we're collecting those penalties.
I think I mentioned something about a stick in the back of the truck or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah. I'm interested to see the contract and see what those penalties are. I know in Haverhill, we have penalties built into our contract as well. For me, and I think Brian said this well, like I'm not an accountant. I don't play an accountant on TV. That said, I have, great attention to detail. I understand school budgets. My area of interest is definitely more so at a higher operations level, which is why when I spoke to Brian initially about the role, I was like, if it doesn't have transportation and other operations pieces mixed in with it, not interested. I don't want to sit in an office and play with a calculator all day. And then when I heard, oh, we might have a building project, I was like, this is awesome. I happen to have been working on one for the last 5 years. So I'm excited to bring that background and working with the MSBA to the table as well.
Yeah, as you know, the last two, the bus was part of the issue of probably of them leaving. So I just want to make sure that you're
How many times are you going to check?
every time, every time. But welcome, welcome.
I think NRT scars everybody, but.
And
it
I
is what it
think
is.
you've checked all the boxes that we wanted, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, thank you,
Is
thank
there
you.
any other questions? The bus question's over.
So I just have two questions. Is it Rich or Doctor?
Rich,
And the second question is, what'd you do in the Army?
I was a medic.
Medic?
Yep.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I think not that he needs it, but but obviously Rich has a tremendously impressive resume. I just wanted to call out in there too that he's also a school committee member, which is pretty cool to have somebody who has the 360-degree view on what all of this looks like and has sat in literally, I think, every seat around the table now.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this a lot in the interview, is in New Hampshire, our budget process for schools is very similar to the regional process. And unfortunately, my district in New Hampshire, our budget actually failed last night. So we move into a default budget at this point, which is interesting because we actually reduced our operating budget next year from this past year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out for us, because at the same time as the budget failing, our teacher contract passed, which of course has an increase in compensation for our teachers. So we're going to have a busy couple of weeks on that front.
We're going to need to hire you a therapist for every
You might,
February and March.
but yeah, I feel your pain. Being a board member is tough.
All joking aside, it was a pretty thorough panel that we had there in the conference room. Anna sat on that as well. And I think, there was a collective breath let out when Rich left the room, because it was like, oh my gosh, I feel like we're there, which was really nice to have sort of a unanimous feeling around that table that was the case.
Agreed, and I feel like it's school experience. And so it's someone who comes in with an understanding of a school operation that is very and entirely different than working in any other sector. So I certainly, as you said it, literally, you walked out of the room and we're like, okay, we have a viable candidate here. So, so yeah, it is, as you know by law, it is my recommendation to you, and ultimately you have to approve the appointment of. You have a draft contract on the table sitting in front of you. Certainly happy to answer any questions or anything about that. It's standard administrator contract. Yeah. Anything else you want to share, Rich, while they're... Nothing? You don't have to.
No, I'm just, interested over the course of the next couple of months to get out and to meet folks and to, the great part about coming on now is you've kind of completed, well, not completed, but you're getting close to the end of the budget process. It will give me the opportunity to come in, kind of get the operational nuts and bolts going, especially with NRT and the start of the school year and bus runs and all that good stuff. But then to, get to those town meetings and get out and meet with folks and figure out what the priorities are so that we can start to put together next year's budget with Dave's help.
I just want to thank those committees for going through that panel and ultimately having Rich be the nomination.
Easy choice.
Has everybody reviewed the contract?
I'll make a motion to authorize the superintendent of schools to execute the contract as drafted and proposed to hire Dr. Richard Poore as the new Director of Finance and Operations at a mutually agreed date.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Welcome to Triton.
Welcome, Rich. Welcome, Dave. Interesting perspective to
twofer,
welcome
yeah.
you both, but yeah, I look forward to the transition and the work ahead, and thank you both.
Okay, moving on. Establishing the building committee. Among the big moments tonight, this stands out. After 3 years of applications, Triton was accepted into the Mass School Building Authority process for this campus. One of the first big check boxes was to establish the building committee, who will do this research from here out and formulate the recommendations. We made a deliberate choice to reach out to as many different groups as we could to get nominations while keeping the committee to a manageable size. In order to bring representatives onto the committee who truly represent the stakeholders in the district, I want to thank Student Council for selecting the students, the select boards for choosing town representatives, the school councils for selecting parents and guardians, the staff, Mr. McCray and Mr. Kelly, for choosing staff members, and the superintendent and facilities manager for selecting the community member with background in this work. Attached to the agenda is a list of 18 names. I would like to extend a special thanks to these individuals who put their names in for this tremendous responsibility and privilege. I'll read aloud the list and then open for discussion. Narissa Wallen, School Committee. Matthew Landers, School Committee. Brian Forget, Superintendent. MSBA required role.
Just Rich's name in here.
It's not a TBD.
He's not a TBD.
Mr. Richard Poor, Director in Finance and Operation, MSBA required role. Patrick Kelly, High School Principal, MSBA required role. Alan McCray, Middle School Principal, MSBA required role. Jonathan Skonecki, Manager of Facilities and Grounds, MSBA required role. Joy Stanton, Assistant Town Manager, Newbury Select Board. Christine Neely, Raleigh Board of Selectmen. Michael Colborn, Salisbury Board of Selectmen. Allison Irving, Middle School Educator. Matthew Haley, High School Educator. Peter Abern, Middle School Parent. Erica Champagne, High School Parent. River Wine, High School Junior. Patrick Jansen, High School Sophomore. Jim Kolb, Community Rep with Industry Experience. And Peter Secondiani, Community Rep with Industry Experience. Those are the 18 members of our building committee.
So can I just add, it was the select boards each selected the town representatives. The educator reps were nominated through the staff. The parent reps were nominated through the school councils, and the students were nominated through the student council. And then John Skonecki and I, we did receive 9 or 10 individuals that were interested. Jim Kolb is actually, has no affiliation with the school, recently moved to Newbury, is a retired OPM, brings an incredible role to have an OPM who is not on the hire, but actually on our school, on our building committee. And then Pete Secondiani is in the industry, has industry and construction experience. So I'll be communicating with all the ones who said they wanted to do it and weren't able to be selected, but we had some great representatives.
And I just want to make note that all 3 towns are represented? Thank you. Throughout all these people who have been picked. So there's members from each of the 3 towns.
I'd like to thank Owen. I know you did a tremendous job recruiting students, and it's not easy because this is a huge thing for students to take on, but I know we, as a committee, felt really strongly about having students on here, so I appreciate you going the extra mile to ensure that we not only had, 2 students who were able to sit on the building committee, but students who were staggered in years so that we're not in a situation where we have 2 students reps going out at the same time and 2 new student reps coming on. So thank you for your work on that. I'll make a motion to approve the slate of candidates as presented for the middle school, high school building committee.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. All those opposed?
Just get that rep, you know?
The next item is policy ECAF, security cameras in schools. Last business meeting, we received policy ECAF, and it's back before us tonight for a second and final reading.
I have nothing new to add.
I'll make a motion to approve revisions to policy ECAF related to the use of security cameras in schools as recommended by the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee as a second and final reading.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is policy review, section E. This is also coming back from the last business meeting for a second and final reading. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve edits in the policy manual section E as presented as a second and final reading.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the Whittier Regional Committee vacancies. Per the Whittier Regional Agreement, the Triton School Committee appoints the members to the Whittier School Committee for our 3-member towns every 3 years. In late January, we received notification that both the Raleigh and Salisbury seats will expire on March 31st of this year. We solicited letters of interest due by February 28th and received 4. 3 were for the Raleigh seat and 1 for the Salisbury seat. All 4 letters of interest are attached to the agenda. Salisbury seems like the easier one, so I will open that one for discussion first. Seeing as we only have 1, Ronald Fitzgerald. So can I have a motion to appoint Ronald Fitzgerald to the open Salisbury seat of the Whittier Regional School Committee for the April 1st, 2025, March 31st, 2028 term?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Now for the Rowley, we have 3. Cesar A. Paglia, Bernie Cullen, and David Irving, who is the incumbent. Is there anybody that would like to start? I know that David Irving has said that this would be his, if he was appointed, would be his last term. Not that that gets him out of the running, but we have Cesar Paglia, sorry, I'm missing the 4 kids' name. Yep. Who is a younger of the 3. And to see somebody that young that wants to be on a school committee is pretty impressive. We've never had multiple candidates for the, so this is new to all of us. So I don't know if you want to.
I was just going to say, I think this is all tremendously difficult as well because we can only do letters of interest unless either we or Whittier move the school committee because we meet on the same nights. So by default, if you're an incumbent, you have to miss your meeting to come to our meeting if we wanted to have them speak. So we've never had them do that just because it, I mean, I'm not going to take them, when I was chair, I wasn't going to take them away from their committee meeting, right, to come here, especially when it's often, as Linda said, just a single letter of interest that we get for the seat.
I wanted to say that the Cesar Paglia has worked for Bruce Tarr and has been at the state level for quite some time, so that obviously can be beneficial to Whittier as well. I don't know if anybody else has any comments? For my, I don't know how this works, for myself, I'm going to vote for Cesar Paglia.
Yeah, I mean, you just make a motion like anything else. So.
Yeah.
You want me to make that motion? Okay. I'll make a motion to appoint Cesar Paglia to the open Rowley seat of the Whittier Regional School Committee for the April 1st, 2025 to March 31st, 2028 term.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Is there any other candidate that anybody else would like to put forward?
Got a passing motion.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, technically you're done.
But did you ask for opposed? Did you vote in favor?
How many votes are there? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh. Yes,
We're counting.
yes.
So are you going to abstain or oppose?
Just give you that face, that's all. That's all I do, Rich.
It's,
You either
Killing me,
abstain
Smalls.
or no.
You've been hiding over there doing the objections all night. Opposing that.
Opposed, okay.
Okay,
No, I'm not opposing.
so Cesar Paglia, we've,
hang on.
what?
What's your vote?
He abstained.
He abstained. Okay, there we
All right,
My
then-
spokesman said I abstained.
go. Okay.
Lord
I don't know if I can do that. Take an easier job.
Okay, moving on. Subcommittee reports. Policy and Advocacy, Paul Goldner.
Policy and Advocacy met earlier. We are drafting letters to our state legislators identifying proposed bills that benefit Triton or education programs in general for their support in the upcoming legislative session. That letter should go out early next week. We're continuing our policy review and started looking at Section F as well. Our next meeting is April 9th at 5:30.
Thank you, Paul. Personnel and Negotiations, Matthew Landers.
We met on March 6th with the PEC to continue talking about the healthcare, and we do not have another meeting scheduled currently.
Thank you, Matthew.
I was going to say, should we say there was a tentative agreement?
I didn't know if I could, so.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that we have a tentative agreement that the associations are taking and reviewing, and if they approve, we'll bring it to you for approval. We can't say the details.
No, I was just thinking about upcoming meetings for an executive session, potential executive session. That's all I was thinking. April meeting, yeah.
Finance, Paul Mayette.
We met on the 26th, just prior to our meeting. As of that meeting, we had $202,000, easy for me to say, unspent / unencumbered for the year. That's been steadily dwindling over the last few months. We meet again on the 27th of this month.
Facilities, Matthew Landers.
We have not had any meetings, we don't have anything scheduled currently.
And the last one is adjournment. I want to thank everybody for their time on the budget. I know it's going to be a difficult one. So I'm going to have a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Have a nice evening.